this is Faith at Faith and Books. How are you doing? I decided to try to do a tag, make up my own tag. It just sort of came to me because I heard the sad news today that Sidney Poitier passed away. I think he was in his upper 80s or early 90s, so, you know, it was to be expected. But he was always one of my favorite actors. I remember seeing him for the first time in To Sir with Love when I was, 11 or 12. And then, you know, he was in so many great movies, Lilies of the Field and In the Heat of the Night. And what was the other one? A Patch of Blue. I recently saw In the Heat of the Night a couple of years ago, maybe a year or two ago. And then I just caught a little part of A Patch of Blue not that long ago, maybe just a few months. I don't know, time flies by in a weird way, but I always loved him. And then about, I would say 6 or 7 years ago, I had to go on this long drive by myself. There was a woman that I had known online for years and years and years from Australia who was actually speaking at a conference about 4 hours from my house. And a bunch of us who had been friends, the homeschoolers, together decided to meet at this restaurant about 4 hours away. And so I got up early and I drove for 4 hours. We spent about 2.5 hours meeting each other. We'd never met each other, but we'd been talking to each other for years. She's a real hero of mine. I always really, really admired her. And then I drove back. So the day before that just came together a couple of days before she was due to arrive and at the conference. And so the day before, I went to the library because I wanted something to listen to. I'm not a huge audio book listener, but I do occasionally. And so I went and I wanted something for the long drive by myself because I'm a nervous driver. I don't like driving. So I wanted something to take my mind off of it. And I just happened upon Sidney Poitier's his own reading of a memoir he wrote, and he might have written more than one. Now, I should know what the other one is, but this one was called The Measure of the Man, and I listened to it on the way. I think I listened to it entirely in that day. Like, I drove there listening to it, and then coming back, I listened to it, and I think I finished it either that day or very soon thereafter. It was read beautifully by the author himself, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful memoir. And it made me wish that I was friends with Sidney Poitier. What a cool person he was. So interesting and it was very introspective. And so my tag today is name your top 10 favorite memoirs. And I'm going to define memoir. It's kind of fuzzy. It can be an autobiography, but a memoir to me is more introspective, it's more intimate, it's maybe less complete. You can have a memoir just about a journey you took or a particular period of your life or your childhood or when you were facing some challenge. It doesn't have to be about your whole life. And I'm listing the ones that made me, at the end of them, made me want to be friends with the author or made me feel really close to the author. So I've read lots of memoirs. Probably I could read more. I don't know if I read any memoirs in 2021, but I should read more. I really, really enjoy it. And so I'm just off the top of my head today, as I was walking around doing stuff, I came up with this list. Number 1 is going to be Measure of the Man by Sidney Poitier, because this video is in his honor. And it was such a compelling experience listening to him tell his own story. I have read lots of memoirs. Like I just finished Augustine's Confessions for the 3rd time or something. But that seems almost like off in its own category. So I'm not going to include that as one of my favorites. And then I've read memoirs that actually made me dislike the person. Like, remember, I went through this period where I really liked Muriel Spark. I was reading all her novels, or a lot of her novels, and then I read her memoir, Curriculum Vitae, and I couldn't stand her by the end of the... I just thought she was so self-serving and narcissistic. I didn't like her at the end, kind of ruined her books for me. So, of course, I'm not including those sorts of experiences either. And this is not an inclusive, all-inclusive top 10, you know. I could probably think more. This is off the top of my head, just what I've been thinking about today since I heard the news about Sidney Poitier. So, so that's gonna be number one. I'll count down, but actually, I'm not counting down because I'm not really ranking these. I'll just go through them, and I can't hold books up for every single one. But anyway, these are my, as of right now, the mood I'm in, top 10 memoirs, and I want to tag people to also do this. I'm trying to think of people to tag. I think I'm gonna tag Mark at A Book Time with Elvis. And Chelsea, I think her channel is Voyage of a Time Wanderer. I'll link both those below. So I'm going to tag those two people. And then, of course, if anybody else who wants to, you are more than welcome. I haven't participated in tags so long. I feel very out of the loop. And I'm just a tiny channel. So anyway, so here's my selection of top 10 memoirs. One memoir that I've always loved since I was a teenager and read it, my mother's copy of it, is We Took to the Woods by Louise Dickinson Rich. And this is a wonderful story of a woman who, this is back probably during World War II or maybe before, maybe in the 30s, who she was on a hiking camping trip with a couple of girlfriends. She was a teacher in Boston, and she meets a guy who lives in upstate Maine, and she winds up marrying him, and she lives out in the boonies in Maine. And it's just a wonderful story of what life was like, how she adjusted to living in the country, and just all the various characters that lived out there with her, and her coping with the change of seasons and all sorts of things. So this is a perennial favorite of mine. So We Took to the Woods by Louise Dickinson Rich. That would be one. Another one that I just love and I reread, I've reread since I started this BookTube channel, which is about 2 years old, and this is a weird blend of fiction and memoir, but this is Isaac Bashevis Singer's A Day of Pleasure and Other Stories for Children. So these are all short stories. Some of them are like fairy tales, some of are his own memories, and some are stories that he's telling, that he's making up, set in the ghetto in, where was he from now? He was from, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting. He was in Poland, Warsaw. Yeah. Anyway, lovely, lovely stories. Just made me want to sit at Isaac Bashevis Singer's knee and listen to his stories. Lovely, really lovely. Made me want to become a Hasidic Jew. Then another one that really impacted me, and I did not read this until I was teaching my kids high school. I don't think I read it before, although I'd heard of it. I don't recall being required to read it in school, but this just really affected me, and in fact, I'm a big fan of Frederick Douglass now. This is the story of his childhood born into slavery, how he eventually escapes, and the beginning of his abolitionist work. And he's such a heroic man, such a deep thinker, self-educated, just such a righteous man, and so laudable. And I'm a real fan. Like, he's one of the people that I would like to meet. You know, if you could have a dinner party with people who have died, he would be the first invite, that I would send. It's Frederick Douglass, because he's amazing. So this was a very powerful book for me to read. And I've read it a couple times now. Then, oh my gosh, I forgot to look this up. See, I'm doing this on the fly because the little 6-year-old's downstairs watching videos or something. So I didn't do my research. Okay, so I read both of Beverly Cleary's books, her memoirs of her childhood. So her childhood was, I think it's on Clickatat, whatever the name of the street is. No, it was called Girl from Yam Hill. I think it's The Girl from Yam Hill. That's it. That was her childhood, and then her young adulthood until she gets married is On My Own 2 Feet. It's it's a dark story because she came from a dysfunctional family and her mother was a piece of work. And they were living in, in the Depression, really, really poor. So, but she was amazing. I really, really just grew to love her, and she writes brilliantly, and I love those two memoirs by Beverly Cleary. And they got, when she passed away, was it last year or the year before? I heard people talking about those. I had never heard about them before, and somehow I discovered them a couple of years ago, and read them. But those memoirs by Beverly Cleary. And then the next one, the 4 memoirs by Betty Mcdonald. So she wrote The Egg and I, The Plague and I, Onions in the Stew, and Anybody Can Do Anything. And I've read all 4 of them. The Egg and I is, of course, most famous, and it was made into a movie with Claudette Colbert and whoever it was. And that's a really funny one. But my favorite was The Plague and I, because it was fascinating. She got tuberculosis, and she had to go stay in the sanatorium. And just that year when she's ill, or a year or 2 when she's really ill with tuberculosis and trying to deal with it, is fascinating. It was really fascinating. And she's so humorous, too. She manages to be funny even in that bleak situation. So The Plague and I by Betty Mcdonald, I really liked. Her last one, was it Anybody Can Do Anything, or was it Onions in the Stew? There's one of them where she's really nasty about the Native Americans. It's kind of a turnoff. It might be the last one. I can't remember. But anyway, so that kind of soured me a little bit. But The Plague and I really enjoyed that one. Then there's one, I can't remember the author. I forgot to look it up. But it's called Driving Over Lemons by Chris somebody or another. He was the first drummer in Genesis, the rock band Genesis. And then he left that, and he had been also a sheep shearer. That he grew up in the country in the north of England or something. And it's the story of how he and his wife bought a farm in Spain and moved to Spain. And it is so funny and so delightful. Just a wonderful reading experience. He was a good writer, and just really, really good. One of my favorite memoirs that I've ever read. So I can't remember his last name though, but I'll list all these below, and I'll put his name in because I forgot to look it up. But Driving Over Lemons by Chris somebody or another, really good. And then I meant to get her book too. I follow this woman named Heather King. She is a current writer, and I follow her on Instagram, and she wrote a set of memoirs of her life. The first one was called Parched, and it's about her young life and her struggle with alcoholism. And you would think it would be really bleak and everything, and it certainly is, but she writes so beautifully. It's so, I couldn't put it down. It was just amazing. And then she went on to write other things. Like I know I have another one by her called Stumbled. I have a few of her books, and I don't have all of them, and I'd like to read them all. I don't know why I don't, why don't I just go get myself her books and read them? I don't know. I need to get my act together. But anyway, Heather King's Parched and Stumble are the 2 memoirs that I'm kind of cheating here because this is more than 10 because I'm listing more than, because some people wrote more than one book that were their memoirs. But anyway, Heather King. And then the next one is Uncle Tungsten, Memories of a Chemical Boyhood by Oliver Sacks. I've talked about this, I think, before. I did terribly in chemistry, and it's just beyond my ability. But his story of growing up and how he went through this period where everything was about chemistry. He just loved chemistry, and as a boy, and it's such a charming story. It's got sad parts in it too, but it's just an amazing story. I've read it a couple of times now, and honestly, when I was homeschooling, I thought you could create a whole chemistry curriculum from this book. So yeah, Uncle Tungsten's Memories of a Chemical Boyhood by Oliver Sacks is just a wonderful, wonderful memoir. And then the last one, again, there are two of them, and I don't know how to say his name. It's by Father Walter Cizek. How do you spell that? I mean, how do you say that? Ciszek. He wrote this one, He Leadeth Me, and then I used to have the other one too, and I think I lent it to someone, but it was called With God in Russia. The With God in Russia was just basically a straight up memoir of what happened to him. What happened to him was when Stalin took over, he snuck into the Soviet Union to be a priest to Catholics who lived in Russia. And he got caught, because it was illegal to say Mass, and he was thrown into prison. And he was in solitary confinement for years. Then he had to go work. He was sent to Siberia, where he had to, work camps. He had a harrowing time. He was there for how many years? 20-some years? I'm trying to remember. And then finally, John F. Kennedy got him out. He got exchanged for somebody that we had captured. So yeah, this is an amazing story of how he kept his sanity. Just an amazingly strong man. And this is sort of the spiritual memoir. So the With God in Russia is sort of just telling the story of what happened to him. This is going back over the same territory, but it's spiritually, how he coped. Like his prayer life, his relationship with God, his relationship with other people spiritually, all that. So really, really compelling and gripping. And, he's another one that I just wish I'd known him, because what an amazingly strong person. Father Cizek or whatever. I think he's up for sainthood in the Catholic Church. I think there's a movement to have him declared a saint. So, and then the last thing is, of course, Measure of the Man by Sidney Poitier. So those are my 10 memoirs, and I'll list them below. And I'm asking Mark and Chelsea to, if they want to do this tag, I'm inviting them to do it. Their top 10 memoirs where you felt like you wanted to be friends with the person after you finished reading it, and it was so compelling, and you felt so close to the person. And then anyone else too. So, okay, that's it from me. I'll try to get this loaded, and I'll list out the books, and I'll put the links in. And so that's it from me. I guess I'll do an update on Sunday. And I can't believe the 6-year-old didn't come in to interrupt. That's great. Anyway, so take care. I hope you're doing well, and happy reading. Bye.